My name is Claire Bennett. The gold pen my mother pushed across the table was the same pen she used every Christmas. It stopped right in front of my plate. It felt like a warning. 3 lawyers I had never seen before sat across the table. My father wouldn't even look at me. My younger sister, Sophie, smiled as if nothing was wrong. Then my mother folded her hands and said, "Sign this or you'll regret it." I looked at the pen for a long time. Then I quietly said one word. "No." The room went silent. Everyone stared at me. A few minutes later, people started leaving the table. But this story didn't begin that night. It started earlier that morning. My mother called and said, "Sophie's wedding needs the family's help." I own a small bookkeeping business above a hardware store in our town. For 10 years, I have worked with numbers every day. Numbers don't lie. People do. There was something my family didn't know. I was married. My husband, Ryan, and I had kept our marriage private. We had seen how my family judged every man I ever dated. We wanted our life to stay peaceful. Growing up, I learned that love in my family always came with a price. When I was 16, I gave my mother all of my savings so we could keep the electricity on. After that, every family emergency became my responsibility. Sophie needed braces. I paid. Her car broke down. I paid. Someone needed money. They called me. Everyone said I was the responsible daughter. But what they really meant was, I was the one they could use. So when my mother asked me for $50,000 for Sophie's wedding, I almost said yes. I had done it so many times before. But this time, something felt different. Instead of agreeing, I asked, "Can I see the wedding budget?" A week later, my mother invited me to a coffee shop. Sophie was already there. She had pictures of wedding dresses, flowers, and expensive venues. My father sat quietly with a notebook full of numbers. The total cost was $52,000. My mother smiled. "You can pay the vendors directly. It will make everything easier." Then Sophie looked at me and laughed. "What else are you saving your money for? You don't even have children." Her words hurt. I had heard things like that my whole life. Usually, I stayed quiet. Not this time. "I'll think about it," I said. That night, Ryan listened while I walked back and forth across our kitchen. I told him everything. He waited until I finished. Then he smiled gently. "Stop thinking like their daughter. Start thinking like an accountant." His words stayed with me. The next morning, I started checking old financial records. At first, I found papers showing my parents had refinanced their house. Then I found a second mortgage. Something wasn't right. The numbers didn't make sense. A few days later, my father called. "I need your social security number," he said. "It's for some family paperwork." My heart sank. As soon as we hung up, I froze all 3 of my credit reports. The very next day, a bank employee called me. "We're calling to verify your information for a loan application." I froze. "What loan?" The woman sounded surprised. "The one where you're listed as a co-borrower and guarantor." I had never signed any loan. I drove straight to my father's office. While he was away, I searched his desk. Inside one drawer, I found the loan papers. There was my name, my old address, my social security number. Everything was there. Only one thing was missing. My signature. The loan was for $90,000. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I took pictures of every page. Then I left quietly. That evening, Ryan spread the papers across our dining table. He looked at me and said, "This isn't a family misunderstanding. This is fraud." Together, we started organizing everything. Ryan wrote a legal letter. I made a timeline. For years, I had kept careful financial records. Now those same records became evidence. For the first time, I realized the truth. My family wasn't asking for help. They were planning to use me. A few nights later, Sophie came to my office. She was crying. "I thought you were paying for my wedding," she said. I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She wiped away her tears. "Mom and Dad told me you already agreed." I slowly shook my head. I never promised them anything. Sophie looked shocked. She had no idea what our parents were planning. She didn't know they wanted to use her wedding to impress her fiancé's wealthy family. She also didn't know they were trying to hide their own financial problems. The next day, Sophie's fiancé, Michael, called me. "Can we meet?" he asked. We met at a small diner. He looked nervous. "My father wants to invest in your parents' business after the wedding," he said. "But something doesn't feel right. The financial records look rushed. They don't make sense." I looked him in the eyes. "Don't send them a single dollar. Wait until Friday." He nodded. "I trust you." Friday finally arrived. That afternoon, my mother called. "We're having a family dinner tonight." Just family. I knew she wasn't telling me the whole truth. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw 3 expensive cars parked outside. Something was wrong. Before I went inside, Ryan squeezed my hand. He stayed down the street with a folder full of evidence. "If you need me," he said, "just call." I nodded and walked inside. Sophie looked nervous. Michael was already there. 3 lawyers sat around the dining table. My mother smiled as if everything was normal. She served dinner. Then she placed a thick stack of papers in front of me. "Just sign this," she said. "It's only to support the wedding. And help your father's business." I opened the papers. The first page sounded friendly, but the rest told a different story. If I signed, I would become responsible for their debts. My money, my property, everything could be taken. I closed the folder. Then I opened my own. I placed the loan application on the table. The room became silent. My father's face turned white. Nobody spoke. Finally, my mother pointed at me. How could you do this to your own family? I stayed calm. I've spent 18 years helping this family. You turned my kindness into a weapon. Just then, the front door opened. Ryan walked inside. Everyone looked at him. He smiled politely. My name is Ryan. I'm Claire's husband. The room froze. My parents didn't even know I was married. Ryan placed another folder on the table. He looked at the lawyers. Any signature forced through pressure or lies is not legally valid. The lawyers quietly read the documents. One by one, they closed their folders. No one argued. Michael looked at my parents. So, the business isn't real? No one answered. He already knew the truth. Then Sophie started crying. You used my wedding? You used me? Neither of my parents could answer. The room became completely silent. I picked up my folder. The gold pen was still lying on the table, untouched. I looked at it one last time. Then Ryan and I walked out together. The next morning, the bank canceled the loan. Without my signature, it couldn't move forward. The wedding money disappeared. There was no more plan. A few weeks later, Sophie moved out of our parents' house. She found a job. She started building her own life. Months later, she called me. I think I'm finally learning something, she said. What's that? I asked. The difference between being needed and being loved. I smiled. I'm glad. A few days later, my parents sent me a letter. It contained two things: an apology and another request for money. I answered neither. For the first time in my life, I chose peace instead of guilt. I finally understood something. Families should never treat love like a debt. And the numbers in my life finally balanced because I stopped paying a bill that was never mine. The end.